Sylvia had always found comfort in the familiar sounds of her neighborhood, until her neighbor's dog, Max, started crying at her door every night. At first, she thought it was just a phase, but when the crying grew more desperate and insistent, Sylvia knew something was wrong. She opened her door one evening to find Max trembling, his eyes pleading for help. Unease crept over her as she decided to follow the dog. What Sylvia discovered next made her turn pale and immediately call 911. Late one evening, you hear a soft whining at your door. At first, you think it's just the wind or maybe a stray cat. The sound is faint but persistent, just enough to make you curious. You try to brush it off, but the noise continues. You get up from your cozy spot on the couch, curiosity starting to get the better of you. What could that be, you wonder? You live alone in a quiet neighborhood, a place where nothing much happens. It's the kind of area where everyone knows everyone, but people tend to keep to themselves. Given the calm nature of your surroundings, you initially think the whining is your imagination. You shake your head, trying to focus on the TV show you're watching. Maybe I'm just tired, you say to yourself, but the sound won't let you relax. The sound continues persistently, refusing to be ignored. By now, you can tell it's definitely not your imagination. It's a soft, insistent whining, almost like a plea. You glance at the clock. It's late, and you don't usually get visitors at this hour. Curiosity and a slight bit of concern get the better of you. All right, let's see what this is, you mumble, deciding to investigate. Upon opening the door, you find your neighbor's reddish-brown dog sitting there, clearly distressed. Max, his fur slightly disheveled, looks up at you with pleading eyes. His tail doesn't wag. Instead, it hangs low. You crouch down, extending a hand. Hey, buddy, what's wrong? Max whines softly as if trying to tell you something. The sight of him alone and worried tugs at your heartstrings. You don't know why the dog is there and figure it must have gotten out somehow. Gently, you coax Max inside, deciding it's too late to do anything tonight. Come on, let's get you inside, you say, guiding him with a soft touch. You give him some water and make a bed for him in the living room. We'll take you back in the morning, you promise, hoping it's just a minor hiccup. The next morning, you knock on your neighbor's door but receive no answer. You call out, "Mark, are you home? I have Max here." But the house remains silent. You knock again, louder this time, hoping for any sign of life. The stillness feels eerie, especially given Max's unexpected visit. Puzzled, you glance back at the dog, who looks at you with those same pleading eyes. Concerned, you decide to keep the dog and head to work, planning to try again later. "I'll come back, all right?" You reassure Max, giving him a comforting pat. You make sure he has food and water before locking up and heading out. Throughout the day, the morning's strange events replay in your mind. I hope Mark's all right, you think, trying to focus on your tasks, but failing miserably. Throughout the day, you can't shake the feeling that something is off. The image of Max's distressed eyes keeps popping into your head. You try to brush it aside, tell yourself you're overreacting, but the nagging worry persists. What if something really is wrong? You wonder, feeling a growing unease. You decide to make a call during lunch, hoping to get some clarity. You call a mutual friend who also hasn't heard from your neighbor recently. "Have you spoken to Mark lately?" you ask. They pause before answering, "No, it's been a few days." "Why?" You explain about Max and the unanswered door. "That's odd," they say, echoing your concerns. "He usually keeps to himself, but this is unusual." The conversation leaves you more unsettled, your mind racing with possibilities. After work, you return home to find the dog crying again, now scratching at the door even more fervently. The sound grates on your nerves, and you can't ignore it anymore. You open the door, and Max's desperate eyes meet yours. His paws never stop moving, and his whimpers tug at your heart. You take a deep breath, realizing that this situation can't be brushed aside any longer. You bring Max inside and head to the kitchen. Grabbing some dog food from a cupboard, you fill a bowl and place it in front of him. He eats hungrily, which only heightens your concern. Something must be seriously wrong, you say to yourself. You sit on the floor, watching Max eat and thinking about your next steps. This growing sense of unease gnaws at you. That evening, you try to take the dog back again, but still no one answers at your neighbor's house. You knock louder, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone home?" Silence. You glance down at Max, who seems just as frustrated. What could be going on? You wonder aloud. The silent, empty house gives you an unsettling feeling. You know you can't leave Max here alone. You notice that it's unusually quiet and dark inside despite the time. The curtains are drawn and there's no movement behind the windows. This isn't normal, you muse, stepping back from the door. Max whines again and you bend down to pet him for reassurance. Let's figure this out, buddy, you say, deciding to take further action. The stillness of the house feels ominous. You decide to call another neighbor to see if they have noticed anything strange. Pulling out your phone, you dial Jim's number. "Hey Jim, have you seen or heard from Mark lately?" You ask when he picks up. Jim pauses before answering, "No, not for a few days." "Why?" You explain the situation with Max. Jim's concern mirrors your own, deepening your anxiety. And this neighbor mentions they haven't seen your neighbor in a few days either. "That's odd," Jim says thoughtfully. "Mark usually walks Max in the morning." You nod, even though Jim can't see you. "Yeah, something feels off," you reply. You thank Jim and end the call, staring at Mark's house. What happened, you ponder. You sense a growing urgency to solve this mystery. You call your mutual friend again, and they express their growing concern too. "I've tried calling Mark several times, but no response," they say. Your anxiety deepens. "He's never been this hard to reach before," you reply. Max whines next to you as if agreeing. "We need to do something," your friend says. You both discuss what could be happening, feeling more and more helpless. You agree to leave a note at the door asking your neighbor to reach out as soon as possible. Scribbling a quick message, you tape it to the front door. "Please call me or any of our mutual friends when you get this," you wrote, hoping Mark sees it soon. Max sits quietly, his eyes following your every move. "We'll get to the bottom of this," you assure him. The following day, you make another attempt and still find no response at the neighbor's house. You knock and call out, but there's no answer. The note you left remains untouched. "This is getting serious," you tell Max, who whines softly. Your worry escalates, knowing this isn't typical behavior for Mark. You feel compelled to investigate further and decide to check around the property. You decide to check around the property more closely and notice that the mail has piled up. Peering through windows, you see nothing but darkness and stillness inside. "Something's definitely wrong," you mutter. You knock on a few neighbors' doors, but no one has seen Mark recently. As evening falls, Max's cries grow louder and more urgent, making you even more anxious. "I can't ignore this anymore," you think. The dog continues to cry louder and scratch more urgently, unsettling you further. Every whimper sounds more desperate and the scratching turns frantic. You try to calm Max down, but his behavior only intensifies. You feel a sense of dread creeping in, realizing that something serious might be wrong. Ignoring it is no longer an option, so you decide to take more proactive steps to find out what's going on with your neighbor. You ask around the neighborhood, but no one seems to have seen your neighbor recently. Each door you knock on brings the same response. People shake their heads and express concern. "He usually keeps to himself, but this is odd," one neighbor remarks. Max continues to whine and paw at the ground, heightening your sense of urgency. You realize you need to keep investigating to figure out what happened. As evening falls, you grow more concerned and wonder if you should call the police. The sky darkens, and an eerie stillness settles over the neighborhood. Max's cries become the only sound breaking the silence, and they echo in your mind. You pace back and forth, debating your next move. Is it too soon to involve the authorities? You ask yourself. But deep down, you know it's a step you might need to take. The dog's behavior adds to your sense of urgency. Max's frantic scratching and incessant whining make it impossible to relax. You're convinced that the dog knows something you don't. You kneel next to him, trying to understand what he's communicating through his agitation. "What are you trying to tell me, Max?" you whisper. His eyes seem to plead for you to take action, and you vow to find answers soon. Another day passes with no word from your neighbor. Max's constant crying gnaws at your nerves, and you feel the need to act. The uncertainty and worry have taken their toll on you, making it hard to focus on anything else. You've exhausted all your immediate options, but you know there has to be something more you can do. Max's distressed behavior pushes you to the edge of your patience and concern. The dog's constant crying gnaws at your nerves, and you feel the need to act. Each passing minute feels like an eternity as you grapple with what to do next. Max stays by your side, his eyes begging for relief from his distress. You know you can't keep putting this off. Determined, you decide to peek inside the house through the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of anything unusual. You decide to peek inside the house through the windows, but can't see much due to the curtains. The fabric blocks your view, and you're left squinting at shadows. Max stands next to you, still and observant. "I have to see more," you mutter. You move to another window, trying different angles, but with no luck. The frustration builds, fueling your determination to find out what's really going on. You notice the lights are off, and the place looks deserted. The silence inside, combined with the darkened windows, sends chills down your spine. Max whines, seeming to sense your unease. You try one more window, but see only the same empty stillness. Why does this feel so wrong? You wonder aloud. You place your hand against the cold glass, feeling the weight of your worry pressing down. Now you're seriously worried and feel a deep pit in your stomach. The nagging sense that something terrible has happened won't go away. Max's persistent distress only amplifies your anxiety. "I can't ignore this," you tell yourself. You inhale deeply, trying to calm your racing thoughts. The situation has escalated beyond curiosity. It's a matter of urgent concern now. You need to take definitive action. You resolve to call 911, feeling there's no other choice. Taking out your phone, you dial the emergency number with trembling fingers. Max stands next to you, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. 911. "What's your emergency?" the operator answers. You explain the situation, emphasizing the unusual silence and darkness in your neighbor's house. "Please send someone quickly," you urge. You hang up, feeling a mixture of dread and relief. The police arrive and begin to investigate your neighbor's absence. You feel tense as they approach the house, their professional demeanor adding an air of seriousness to the situation. Max sits by your side, his eyes fixed on the officers. "Stay here," one of them instructs you, and you nod, feeling a mix of hope and anxiety. You watch closely as they survey the scene, their expressions turning more serious. They notice the same things you did, piled up mail and a quiet dark inside. One officer bends down to inspect the stack of letters, his brow furrowed. "This doesn't look good," he mutters to his partner. Max whimpers softly, echoing your own unease. The officers glance around the porch and yard, noting the eerie stillness. "Let's see what else we find," one of them says, moving toward the door. After knocking and announcing themselves several times, they decide to enter the house. "NYPD," one officer calls out, rapping on the door with authority. With no reply, they exchange glances before reaching for the doorknob. "We're going in," one says, and they push the door open slowly, cautiously. You hold your breath, feeling the gravity of the situation deepen. Max presses closer to you, sensing the tension in the air. They ask you questions about any known family or friends. Does he have close relatives or someone who visits frequently? One officer inquires. You shake your head. Not that I know of. But he has a friend, Tom, who also hasn't heard from him, you respond, trying to recall any other details. They jot down the information and continue to piece together the puzzle. All right, we'll follow up with that, the officer assures you. You mention the mutual friend and the fact that no one has heard from your neighbour. Tom and I both called him repeatedly, but nothing, you explain to the officers. They nod, adding it to their notes. It's unusual for him to be this out of touch, you continue. Their serious expressions drive home the gravity of the situation. We'll try to get in touch with Tom, one officer says, signalling his partner to proceed. Your curiosity peaks as you watch the officers. Each step they take, each look they exchange, intensifies your anticipation. They move methodically, inspecting every detail. Max stays close to you, his eyes never leaving the scene. You strain to see beyond the door, hoping for any sign of what's wrong. The officers move further into the house, and you wrestle with the urge to follow them inside. Inside the house, the officers inspect room by room. You watch from the doorway as they methodically open doors and scan the interior. Clear, one says after checking a bedroom. Another officer peers into the living room, noting the undisturbed furniture. Each report of a clear room only deepens the mystery. The house is eerily quiet, adding to the suspense. Let's keep looking, an officer states resolutely. They find no immediate signs of struggle or foul play, but do note the house seems unexplainedly abandoned. One officer comments, "It's like he just vanished." You feel a cold shiver run down your spine. Max continues to whimper softly at your feet. The officers exchange glances, clearly puzzled. We need to dig deeper, one says, moving to the next room. The abandoned feel of the house unsettles you further. They also find some unfinished meals on the table, which suggests your neighbour didn't plan to be away long. The sight of the food raises more questions. He left in a hurry, one officer observes, pointing to half-eaten plates. You nod, the implications weighing heavily on your mind. Max sniffs the air, perhaps recognizing familiar scents. This doesn't make any sense, you mutter, feeling the tension ratchet up. They come back to ask you about the dog and inquire if you noticed any unusual behavior before. Has Max been acting out of the ordinary? One officer asks. You nod, explaining the incessant whining and scratching. He's been relentless, you say. The officer jots down your observations. That's definitely a red flag, he notes. Max, as if understanding the scrutiny, lies down quietly, his eyes still filled with worry. You mention the dog has been crying and scratching at your door incessantly. The police note the behavior, indicating it could be a crucial detail. Dogs often know when something's wrong, one officer says, looking at Max. His persistence, combined with your observations, adds a sense of urgency to the investigation. The officers share a look before one assures you, "We'll get to the bottom of this." You now feel a mixture of dread and nervous anticipation. The house, once a place of routine, now feels like a mystery wrapped in worry. You can't shake off the feeling that something terrible has happened. Max's constant whimpering only heightens your anxiety. Each minute waiting feels like an eternity, and you desperately want answers. Please, let there be a simple explanation, you think, but deep down, you doubt it. As the days pass, the police continue their investigation while you take care of the dog. Max stays by your side constantly, his anxiety mirroring your own. Every time you hear a siren or see a cop car, your heart skips a beat. Despite trying to maintain some normalcy in your routine, the cloud of uncertainty hangs over you. You wonder, how long can this go on? The dog seems to be getting more anxious, its whining escalating at night. Max's restlessness becomes more pronounced, and he frequently paces around your house. Every shadow and creak seems to set him off, showcasing his distress. You find yourself waking up more often, his anxious cries tearing through your sleep. It's clear that Max isn't just being stubborn. Something deeper is bothering him, making you even more concerned. You start wondering if the dog knows something or senses something you don't. Max's relentless behavior feels purposeful, as if he's trying to communicate something crucial. "What is it, boy?" You often ask him, hoping for some kind of sign. His sad eyes seem to tell a story you can't quite grasp. This realization pushes you to think harder about the situation, wondering what you might have overlooked. You decide to visit some places your neighbor was known to frequent, hoping to find any clues. First, you head to the local cafe, where Mark often grabbed his morning coffee. The barista shakes her head. "Haven't seen him in days." You move on to the park, checking the usual spots but finding nothing. Each dead end fuels your worry, but you press on, determined to find answers. At work, you can't concentrate. Everything feels surreal. Your mind keeps drifting back to Max and the unanswered questions about Mark. You find yourself staring blankly at your computer screen, unable to focus. Colleagues notice your distraction and ask if everything is all right, but you just nod, unable to explain. The mystery and worry gnaw at you, making each workday feel like an uphill battle. You discuss the situation with your mutual friend again, both feeling increasingly helpless. "I can't believe he's just vanished," they say over the phone. You share your fruitless attempts to find clues and how Max's anxiety keeps ramping up. "What do you think we should do next?" your friend asks. The weight of uncertainty hangs heavy. Both of you feel more lost with each passing day. One afternoon, you receive a call from the police asking you to come over to the neighbor's house. "We've found something that could be important," the officer says. Your heart races as you hang up. Grabbing your coat, you rush out the door with Max at your heels. The urgency in the officer's voice plays over in your mind. This could finally be the break we need, you think, hope intertwining with fear. They mention they've found something that could be important. Upon arriving, the sight of multiple police cars only heightens your anxiety. The officer speaks calmly, but his words are charged with significance. "We discovered a locked door in the basement that needs further examination," he explains. You swallow hard, your thoughts racing. What could be behind it, you wonder, as Max whines softly beside you. Your heart races as you head over, escorted by more officers arriving at the scene. Flashing lights and the sound of police radios crackling fill the air, adding to the urgency of the moment. You glance at Max, his alert expression mirroring your own anxious anticipation. Officers move with purpose, their serious faces indicating the gravity of the situation. You follow closely, eager to understand what they have discovered. The dog follows you, seeming to sense something big is about to happen. His ears perk up and he stays right next to your legs, refusing to lag behind. "Come on, Max," you mutter, as though he needs any encouragement. His persistence gives you a strange sense of comfort and urgency combined. You both edge closer to the house, where a gathering of police officers awaits. The air feels thick with tension as you approach the house. You can almost cut it with a knife. Max's whimpers add to the uneasy atmosphere. Officers stand around, some talking into their radios, others scanning the surroundings. You take a deep breath, trying to maintain some semblance of calm. One officer nods at you, signaling the importance of what lies ahead. You can feel your heart pounding in your chest. The police tell you they found a locked door in the basement that required further examination. "We've checked the rest of the house, but this door, it's unusual," an officer explains, pointing towards the basement entrance. You feel a wave of anxiety. What could be behind it, you wonder. The officers exchange concerned glances before moving toward the basement. Max pulls at his leash, eager to follow. The police break open the locked basement door, and what they find shocks everyone present. There's a moment of silence, followed by hurried movements and exclamations of surprise. You try to peer into the darkened basement, straining your ears to catch snippets of what's being said. The officers seem to freeze for a moment before springing into action, speaking rapidly into their radios and moving with newfound urgency. Your neighbour is discovered inside, alive but extremely weak and in distress. The sight of them, so frail and barely conscious, sends a jolt through you. "Get a medical team down here ASAP," an officer shouts. You can't believe your eyes. Mark, who seemed to have vanished into thin air, is here, looking utterly helpless. Max's fervent barks fill the air, his excitement almost palpable as he senses his owner's presence. Apparently, they had been trapped for days due to an accident that left them unable to call for help. The officers relay this to you as paramedics rush past, bringing in stretchers and medical equipment. "A shelf fell, pinning him down," an officer clarifies. You feel a shiver run down your spine, imagining the sheer helplessness Mark must have felt. It's a scenario straight out of a nightmare. The dog's consistent efforts at your door finally make sense. All those nights of scratching and whining weren't just for show. Max was trying to save his owner. You look at the dog with newfound respect, realizing just how crucial his actions were. "Good boy," you whisper, tears stinging your eyes. Max wags his tail slightly but stays focused on the scene, his cries now quieter but filled with relief. The officers immediately call for medical assistance while you watch in disbelief. Every second counts now as paramedics work swiftly, checking Mark's vitals and preparing him for transport. You stand rooted to the spot, your mind racing. Where would he be without Max? You think, the gravity of the situation hitting you hard? The paramedics lift Mark onto a stretcher, their movements precise and efficient. You feel a mix of relief and horror, realizing how close your neighbor was to suffering a worse fate. The whole ordeal feels unreal, like something out of a movie. Yet, the evidence is right there in front of you. Mark's frail form, the medical team's urgent work, and Max's unwavering loyalty all paint a vivid picture. You take a deep breath, processing the whirlwind of emotions coursing through you. You find out from the police and paramedics that your neighbor had indeed been trapped in the basement by a heavy shelf that fell. The officers explained that Mark was doing some organizing when the shelf toppled over. The paramedics detail how he couldn't move it off himself in his weakened state. Listening to how it happened makes you wince at the thought of his helplessness and the critical timing of Max's actions. They had no way to reach their phone or call for help. Mark's phone had fallen out of reach when the shelf pinned him. Without any means of communication, he was stuck, hoping someone would notice his absence. The officers' faces are solemn as they recount the details, highlighting how crucial the dog's persistent behavior was. Every aspect of the situation underscores just how dire and desperate Mark's predicament had been. Your neighbor's dog, in a desperate attempt to find someone to save its owner, kept crying at your door until you took action. One of the officers comments on Max's loyalty and determination, noting that not every dog would have been so persistent. You look at Max, feeling a surge of emotion. "You really are a hero, aren't you?" you say, patting his head. His eyes meet yours, filled with relief and trust. That persistent behavior is what ultimately led to their rescue. If not for Max's incessant cries and your subsequent actions, Mark might not have been discovered in time. The thought sends chills down your spine. The police and paramedics continue their work, but you can't shake the overwhelming realization of how much hinged on the dog's actions. Max's loyalty truly made the difference, turning a potential tragedy into a remarkable rescue. You feel a wave of emotion as you realize the dog essentially saved your neighbor's life. The gravity of the scenario settles in, and you're struck by the sheer importance of Max's persistent cries. You crouch down beside him, whispering, "You did it, buddy. You saved him." Max's tail wags slightly, his eyes filled with a sort of knowing relief. The bond between you and the dog feels stronger than ever. Your neighbor, though weak and hospitalized for recovery, expresses immense gratitude to you when they finally regain their strength. "I owe you my life," Mark says, his voice shaky but heartfelt. And Max, he's a true hero. You smile, a mix of relief and pride swelling within you. The ordeal cemented a bond not just between you and Max, but also with Mark. The incident redefines your sense of community. You realize just how important that dog had become in saving a life. The impact of Max's actions ripples through your mind, making you appreciate the depth of his instincts and loyalty. You're not just a pet, you're a savior, you say to Max, rubbing his ears affectionately. The newfound respect you have for him doesn't just elevate him in your eyes, it solidifies his place as a true friend and protector. You reflect on the bond formed through this ordeal. Every glance at Max reminds you of the life-saving actions he took. This shared experience with Mark and Max gives you a deeper appreciation for the ties that bind neighbours and friends. Your conversations with Mark begin to stir a newfound camaraderie, born from the harrowing days of uncertainty and the eventual relief. It's a feeling of unity that transcends ordinary neighbourly relationships. Mutual appreciation between you, the dog, and the neighbour builds a stronger community. You start noticing how the other neighbours become more engaged, checking in on each other more often. Even Jim, who initially seemed detached, makes more of an effort to stay in touch. It's as if Max's heroic act has knitted the community tighter, making everyone realise the importance of looking out for each other. Life returns to normal, but the bonds formed through this event remain unbreakable. Mark slowly recovers, and you find yourself visiting him more often, with Max always by your side. The once familiar neighbourhood now feels like a community united by a shared experience of worry, relief, and gratitude. The bonds forged through this harrowing ordeal stand as a testament to the power of loyalty, persistence, and neighbourly care.